Beers are live.
I could hear. Martin Hepworth, welcome to BeerCon 1.
Thank you very much, and thank you for what you might not thank me for coming on, but hey, there you go.
We'll see. We'll see. We'll let the audience decide. They are the ultimate judge in these things.
Indeed.
Martin, just spend a minute or two telling us who you are and what you do.
Who I am? I'm a practicing sysadmin and reformed programmer for a smallish, medium-sized Australian software house, and I help run the UK side of all the sysadmin stuff.
Cool. So how did you get into InfoSec?
Well, kind of been in sysadmin, I don't think you can avoid it myself. I kind of first experienced it from a hard point of view when I was a student, and one of the many decades ago. One of the guys there was the ultimate, well, the archetypal hacker. I don't think he had a black hoodie, but yeah, he had the person who was on 2 passwords on Vax VMS, for those that remember VMS.
Yep.
Both randomly generated 32 characters, alphanumeric and special character strings that he remembered in his head because he was really smart. And he was the one that was always getting banned off the system for 2 weeks at a time because he'd got into areas that he shouldn't have. So that was my kind of like first experience of seeing it live, as it were. That was back in the mid-80s. But yeah, then as a sysadmin or programmer first, and then into more the sysadmin side, I don't think that being in the industry, infosec, cyber security, whatever you want to call it this week, I don't think you can avoid it really. It's part and parcel of the whole IT industry.
So sysadmin as a title, as a role, I think that's kind of become a little bit of a misnomer over the years. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
It's old school. It's awesome. It's it
is.
Network ombudsman.
We still see the term used, and in my place of work, we have sysadmins. But here's the funny thing: they're kind of a bit more than that, right? So they are people that build things. Okay, they don't just administer and look after and feed and water systems. They actually manufacture systems, in my experience, and that can be full stack. That can be everything from spinning up a server, drop it into a subnet, organizing the firewall rule changes, and actually applying them, and all the rest of it. Is that something that do you get involved in at that level, or?
It is. Working for a smaller company, you don't have the opportunity, need to have the requirement to have a dedicated network team, a dedicated firewall person even. You have to have a wide knowledge that gives you, it's all about the CISPP, or CISSP joke that you have to have something that's a mile wide and an inch deep. So you need to know a little bit about everything. And for me, that's what.
Did we lose you, Martin?
I think we might have lost him a bit.
Network difficulties.
Yeah.
But while we were in for Martin, there was one thing I wanted to comment on, and I think it's really encouraging that. The Martin mentioned that he's a sysadmin, but you can't get away from InfoSec.
And from an InfoSec point of view as well, you'll constantly need to keep your knowledge up to a level. You know what's happening, where are the current threats from, how does that affect the systems that I'm responsible for, and that then goes back to what systems am I responsible for and what's on those systems. So you're talking about going back to that basics of the top 10.
Cool. So one thing I was just going to add, the fact that you mentioned that you're a sysadmin, you can't get away from InfoSec, I think that's really encouraging. That it shows that people are thinking about info security, even though it's not their core responsibility. Do you notice many others with a similar sort of thinking?
Yeah, I think there's another group that I'm involved with on a more sysadmin side. It's a Spiceworks community, and I know there's a couple of folks around here that have been involved with that in the past. And again, it's the wider, you're not stuck necessarily in one technology. But going back to an InfoSec point of view on that, you still need that specialist help at certain points. So you might not be an expert, you might not be an IDS expert, but you've got to know enough to be able to work your way through that. Social engineering, so you can help educate, and I know Scott was talking about that a lot. There's that education piece in there as well. It's not just teaching someone to use how to use Excel or whatever they're doing. It's looking at what risks are we seeing coming in, how can we help people identify those risks, and how can we help the wider community identify them, deal with them, so that we're not falling for it. A lot of the awareness training that I do, and I'm going to do one in about 3 days at work, I don't concentrate on, well, we're going to see this risk, this technical risk or whatever. I look at it from a wider stance of how can we uplift society in general. So the risks we're talking about, anti-Mabel getting romance scams from this nice-looking gentleman from Italy, and how would they spot the things that anti-Mabel might be talking about or not talking about, the changes, how you can spot issues around your family or friends, how you can educate them to spot, why is DHL sending me a delivery note or a returns note? All these sort of things that we're seeing around where the scammers, which is what they are at the end of the day, the crooks, are trying to get money out of us for whatever reason.
Interesting stuff.
That's a large part of my role within, once I drop into my InfoSec hat, is it's not just looking at the technical risks, making sure things are upgraded, making sure things are patched. It's looking at the wider scams that we're seeing going on around it. And so talking to some of the social engineers, some of the ROCU, the regional organised crime units in the UK, and some of the cyber units from the local police forces over here. What are they seeing? So that we can start to let people know this one's slightly different. It's still basically a scam, and a lot of the older people, especially, are really good at spotting the scams because they kind of lived through it from a face-to-face point of view.
Yeah, the guy knocking on the door kind of thing.
Yeah, not knocking on the door, wanting to read the meter and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, if you can relate it back to that kind of thing and go, well, it's the same thing. There's, the people sending things through the post even to say that you've left a parcel, or you couldn't deliver this parcel, ring this number, it's a 09 number, and they keep you hanging on for hours. Well, that's you're going to get the same sort of thing online with emails. You're also, if you're selling a house, there's a big risk at the moment of people the last minute emailing in or to either the solicitor or to you to say the bank account's changed, you need to send the money to.
Yeah.
So this is, it's just a variation on an old scam of writing writing to businesses to say we've changed bank account.
Nothing changes but the method, right?
No, exactly. There's nothing new under the sun, and there's just slight variations on the same thing. So if we can keep the message going that all these scams are out there, there's something we've had this thing in the InfoSec for years about trust and verify, and Paul Asadorian on his set of InfoSec podcast has been going on about verify and then trust. So it's bringing it around. Sort of, well, why should I trust you? How do I know that you're my bank that's calling me to say that there's been a fraudulent transaction? You know, and we need to move money or whatever. It's like, well, okay, I'll ring you back. You pick up a different phone, if it's a mobile. Ring them back on the number that you've got on the back of your card. So it's that trust then verifies. Again, I would really like that. Sort of like, you can be polite, you can still say, okay, and a lot of the banks will say, that's fine, ring me back on the number on the back of your card.
Yeah.
So that you know that you're talking to an actual bank employee. I mean, they check you know, what's your name, what's your date of birth, what's your mother's first name, what's your pet's name, all this sort of stuff, when they ring you up to verify that it's you. But how can you verify that it's the bank? Or how can you verify that it's the solicitor that you're dealing with, that you might not necessarily recognise the voice because it's one of the staff?
Yeah.
Do you think people's personalities and that come into it, also maybe perhaps culture? So I know in the UK we often try to be as polite as we can. So perhaps people are a bit worried about offending people on the other line, like how they worried that the person on the other line might think that they're just being rude or something like that. Do you think that has some impact?
I think so, and the scammers tend to go on the fear factor. So if you're and an urgency, you've had this happen. Yeah, you need to know that this has happened. We want to help you. So you know, there's a fear, there's an urgency about it. There's a fear that something's happened to your account. My wife had a text through from HMRC recently, or allegedly from HMRC, to say that there's a fraud against her account, and she should ring or click this link. HMRC don't operate like that. So, you know, again, it's an education piece.
I'll find a Boots drugstore so you can buy your gift cards to remove your immigration passport hold for you.
Yeah, exactly. It's often questioning, well, you know, the cybers on the police force have this really good thing going around. I don't know how it came up with it, but it's take 5. It's, you know, hang on, just have a breath, have a cup of tea. You don't need to react to it. It's not, no one's going to die.
Yeah.
It's not that urgent. Come back to it and have a think about it. Talk to, you know, some people in your family that you've had this thing. Does it sound right to you? Right. So, but it is. This is where the scammers try and get you. They're looking at the urgency, the importance of it. You need to react now. And at the end of the day, do you really need to react now? Would 5 minutes be helpful to you? You know, don't just rattle from it. And this, I think, and it's the same from a work point of view as well. You know, the CEO emails someone in finance, goes, I need Amazon gift vouchers now. So again, there's the authority figure coming in. There's the fear factor of the authority figure potentially, but also that time to think. A little bit like that nowadays. I'll microwave that fraction of what do you mean I've got to wait 3 minutes from my bank account. That factor that everything's immediate. And explaining this to people sometimes in a funny way. I also, when I'm doing the PowerPoints, it just becomes a talking point. So I talk about upgrading your
Oh, It looks like we might have lost him a bit, or maybe it's me.
On Unix systems and so on, but I've still 2 years later, I get still people coming up to me and making a little fun about this little dog patch. So then,
Well,
but it is all about getting the conversation going as well. I find it's again try and be a little bit silly. I know there's a couple of other people in the industry that do this sort of thing, but when I'm giving talks, I get interaction. I'm throwing sweets about. It keeps people awake, and it also again it makes it a little bit more fun than having to sit through 2 hours of deathbed PowerPoint.
Yeah. So we lost you for a little bit there, but I think we got the gist of where you were coming from. And I think, the innovation, the use of humor to try and get that positive reinforcement and that positive awareness is key, is absolutely key.
It is. It's making it fun. If things are a little bit fun, they're not deathly boring. People are going to engage a little bit more. And then they're going to come to you with the question. And if they do fall for things, it's human. Don't blame them. Help them out. And you're not going to get a negative reaction or a hidden reaction last time. Again, going back to a sysadmin, sort of my keyboard's broke. Okay, anything happened? Yeah, I spilled coffee on it. Great, thanks for letting me know.
Yeah. No, it just stopped working. Why is it wet?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's just that people, if you build that trust up, people will be honest with you, and it helps everybody do their job a little bit better.
Yeah,
Martin, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
You mentioned earlier about your dealings with like the regional organised crime units and all that kind of stuff, and collaboration with law enforcement generally. How are you finding that? It's something I do a little bit of in my role, but are you finding there's a good sharing of information culture happening, or is there resistance in places? How's it working for you?
Yeah, it can be quite tricky to get hold of someone if you've got something active going on at the time. The Roccoos have been, I noticed in the last couple of months, have been a bit more active on social media. There's this thing in the UK that the NCSC has taken over recently, CISP, that you can join. But again, that's quite tricky to join as a community. Yeah. You've got to get a sponsor. So you've got to know someone who's already in the community to get community. Which I still comment on, shall we say, when people ask about how do I get onto it, I go like, yeah, I can help, but this is and I get the fact that they need to keep it, they can't, I don't know, keep it specialised.
I think specialised. Yes, I mean CISP. I'm a member of it. I remember probably 18 months ago logging into it for the first time, and it was a barren wasteland.
Yeah, it is. It is tends to be quite quiet. There are various things that pop up. A lot of the local government and to a lesser extent central government are on there.
It did seem. Yeah, it seemed to me that when I first logged in, it was basically there were a few published articles by the NCSC, and that was it. Okay, and then when WannaCry happened, we suddenly saw two things happen: a massive influx of new members, and a hell of a lot more actual information sharing. So now, when you log into CISP, you do tend to find it's actually got some good stuff happening in there, and you'll see probably quite a few people you recognise.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's definitely grown. I'm not quite sure how we can encourage that growth. It's obviously very UK specific, and said there is that, if you excuse the pun, policing of the membership, so that it keeps it UK specific and but then it provides some barrier to entry. If you can't get your company on it, but it's definitely getting better, and I think that sort of thing should be encouraged. But we need to think about ways of how can we get more people onto that program. If people want to need to get on that, or would like to get on that program, they're in the UK, they'd like to get their organisation sponsored onto it. Absolutely, come and find me on the Twitters, and yeah, just be careful with that last character on my Twitter name. And, and I'm more than happy to help. Yeah, it's how can we get people engaged more? Things like this are going to really help that we're on now. How can we, the B-sides conferences that are very local, you don't have to go to Vegas every year to go to a really good conference. There's lots around the world. Yeah, I encourage anybody to get involved in all this sort of stuff. It educates yourself, and that enables you to then educate others around you.
Absolutely, absolutely right. Okay, Martin. Well, time is now up, mate.
Cheers. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much, Martin.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. Really appreciate that. Thanks for your time. Cheers, man.
No problem.
Cheers, Martin.